Hey you, thanks for stopping by. The day's done, so let's settle in and make ourselves comfortable. I brought a few stories to share. The chair that waited too far from the table. There was a chair that had once belonged to a dining set, but over time it had drifted to the far corner of the room. Not out of rejection, just quiet reorganization. The table still stood, polished and still, but the chair had found its place in the echo of things. Its legs were slightly uneven, so it rocked gently on the floorboards when somebody passed nearby. No one sat in it anymore. A jacket had once hung over the backrest. That jacket was gone now, but the shape of it remained in memory alone. Dust had settled in the weave of the seat. Not heavy, not untouched, just enough to soften his presence. Light from the window hit the corner each afternoon for exactly 7 minutes. The chair didn't shift, didn't respond, but if you stood quietly in that corner, you could feel how long it had been waiting. Not for someone, not even for purpose, just waiting. The rain that didn't soak anything. There was a moment one afternoon when it began to rain, but only gently. The kind of rain that doesn't make puddles or drip loudly from leaves. It touched everything lightly and then seemed to second-guess itself. The air smelled different for a few minutes, damp and soft. The kind of scent that reminds you of other days you've forgotten. A few drops clung to the rim of a watering can. One landed on the back of a windowsill spider and was carried for several minutes like a crown. Then it stopped, not suddenly, just less and less, until nothing fell at all. No one went outside, but everything still felt changed. The drawer of almosts. There was a drawer that didn't quite close. It had no label, no assigned use. Inside were things that had almost mattered. Safety pins, faded coupons, a dried out pen that still wrote if you pressed hard enough. A rubber band had tangled itself around a tiny screwdriver. A button rattled loosely near a slip of torn paper with half a phone number. No one ever emptied the drawer. It wasn't messy. It wasn't clean. It was kept. Whenever someone walked past, it made a small wooden sound, like it was adjusting to being forgotten. The handles had a coolness to them, even in summer. The drawer never asked to be opened, but it always seemed ready to be. The bed with only one pillow. In a room that didn't host guests anymore, there was a bed with only one pillow. The other had been removed long ago. Maybe washed, maybe borrowed, maybe simply moved to another room and never returned. The sheet had a crease that never smoothed out. The blanket was folded once at the foot, as though halfway between ready and undone. No one laid in it anymore, but the shape of sleep still hovered in the center of the mattress. The remaining pillow held a shallow impression that never quite vanished. Light dust gathered only at the edges, but never in the middle. It looked like a bed waiting for someone to rest, but not in a way that needed to happen, just in a way that once had. The toy with no game. In the bottom of a cardboard box marked miscellaneous, there was a plastic ball attached to a string. No one remembered what it had once belonged to. It wasn't a complete toy, just part of something once. The string had tangled itself into loose knots, and the ball had dulled into a warm, cloudy red. It didn't bounce, it didn't roll. It rested quietly among a deck of cards missing the kings and a crumpled receipt from a store that no longer existed. Every so often, the box shifted just enough to make the ball slide an inch or two. Not far, just enough to remind the others it was still there. It hadn't been played with in years, but it still understood waiting. The mirror with no wall. There was a mirror that leaned against a shelf instead of hanging on a wall. It was never mounted, just propped there, like it had wandered into the room and decided to stay. Its edges were uneven, as if they'd been filed down by hand, and and the backing had peeled in one corner to reveal a soft copper underside. The reflection wasn't clear, but it wasn't broken either, just a little loose around the edges. When someone walked past, the mirror caught only a part of them, a shoulder, a sleeve, the curve of emotion already ending. It didn't offer a whole picture, just fragments, and it never tried to correct the view. The leaf that landed early. There was a single leaf resting near the edge of a sidewalk, though the season hadn't quite turned. It wasn't brittle or curled, just quietly removed from its branch before the others had begun to consider letting go. It hadn't fallen with force. There was no wind that day. It had simply arrived on the ground, soft side down, without announcement. The tree above didn't notice. Each day it faded just a little. A new vein dulled, the green edge toward a softer yellow. It didn't rot, it didn't rush. It stayed just long enough to no longer remember how it got there. The path with no destination. There was a narrow path worn into a patch of tall grass. It didn't lead anywhere, just curved gently behind a low hill and then faded out, like a half-remembered dream. It wasn't well traveled, and there were no footprints left behind. The grass leaned over the edges as if trying to take the path back. Wildflowers had settled near the middle undisturbed. The wind passed through now and again, but never carried anything with it. No markers, no signs, just the idea of a trail remembered by the ground. It existed not to be followed, but simply to have been there once. The clock, that was always 10 minutes off. There was a wall clock in a waiting room that no one waited in anymore. It wasn't broken, it was just always 10 minutes behind. No one ever adjusted it. The minute hand moved without hesitation, just not in sync with anything else. The ticking was soft, the kind you don't hear until everything else stops. At some point, a spider had traced a line between the 12 and the 2, but even that thread had sagged from stillness. The batteries hadn't been changed in years, but the clock didn't protest. It wasn't wrong, just slightly separate. It told time like a memory, not a measurement. The sock that slipped between the dryer and the wall. No one knew how long it had been there. The dryer still hummed and clicked, but the sock had fallen into a space that didn't feel like part of the laundry room anymore. It was dryer-lent soft and warm along one side, where the machine radiated gently through the metal. The other side had taken on the cold stillness of the wall behind it. It hadn't unraveled, it hadn't molded, it just paused. It existed in the space between finished and forgotten. The fog that didn't leave a trace. One morning, a low fog drifted through a neighborhood before anyone had opened their curtains. It wasn't thick enough to hide anything, just enough to change the way the air moved. Streetlights blurred into soft halos. The grass glistened without dew. A breeze tried to organize the fog once, but gave up quickly. The fog didn't cling or swirl. It passed like a quiet thought. By the time someone stepped outside, it had already gone. Not vanished, just lifted, like it had never landed. The bowl that held only steam. There was a ceramic bowl on a small table near a window. It had once held soup, something warm and simple. The steam had risen for a while, fogging a spot on the glass above it, then slowly disappeared. The bowl remained, clean, but not washed. There were no crumbs, no spoons, no stains, just a faint warmth left behind, like a thought that had been remembered and then set down. The light from outside caught the curve of the bowl gently, and for a brief moment It seemed to hold something again, but it was only steam, and only for a little while. The package that wasn't delivered yet. A small cardboard box sat on a shelf beside the door, sealed but with no label, no writing, no return address, just a light indentation where a piece of tape had been pressed carefully and without urgency. It wasn't heavy. Inside, something shifted once, gently, but it never happened again. The shelf dusted around it, not over it, as if even the air acknowledged it still had somewhere to go. No one picked it up. No one asked about it. It wasn't lost, just not moving yet. The tea bag that was never used. In the back of a wooden tea box, there was still one tea bag still sealed in its paper wrapper. The label had curled slightly at the edges, but the string remained tucked neatly around it like it had just been placed there. The paper had yellowed a little with time. Its scent, faintly floral, maybe something with lavender, still lingered when the box was opened, though no one ever reached for it. The other flavors had long since been used up, replaced, or forgotten, but this one just stayed, not saved, not skipped, just there. The candle that never got a flame. There was a small wax candle on the narrow windowsill. The wick was unburnt, standing upright as if it expected something, but not recently. Dust had settled on the rim in a soft circle. The wax had faded from pure white to something closer to pearl. Once, light had hit it at just the right angle and cast a soft reflection onto the wall behind it. It never melted. It never flickered. It never filled the room with scent. It simply held its shape and stayed still. The door that never fully closed. There was a door in an old hallway that didn't latch properly. It never swung wide open, but never shut tight either. It rested just barely ajar, as if waiting for a breeze that never arrived. Light from the other room would spill through the crack in a perfect sliver at sunset. Once in a while, a draft would nudge the door slightly, enough to whisper but never speak. The floor beneath it held a faint scuff where the edge had brushed back and forth for years. It never asked to be fixed. It just stayed a little open. And that's all I have for tonight. The stories have come to an end, so I'll be on my way. Sleep well, and maybe we'll meet again tomorrow.